Hello, welcome back to the No Way Jose podcast. We're back again for another Weekly Wolfson, doing it on Wednesday to complete the alliteration. For the patrons, at least, if you're a non-patron, you will get it this weekend. But I have Matt Wolfson joining me again today, and we will be talking about Thomas Massie and the craziest primary I think there basically ever has been. So we'll talk about all of that and more when we get into the show. If you like this show, if you like what you're hearing, what you're seeing, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications. That way you can see when we drop new videos and when we're going live. We'll see you in the
No way, Jose.
The following footage proves beyond any doubt that the tanks intentionally set the house on fire. It proves that the Branch Davidians were murdered. You can see that this tank has a gas jet on the front that shoots fire. You can also see the fire quite plainly. The tank goes into the house twice, and each time as it backs out, the fire at the gas jets is plainly visible.
We must all do more to recognize and look for the early warning signals that deeply troubled young people send.
Hey, Matt, welcome back to the show. Pleasure to have you with us. We're going to be covering a couple of your pieces. We're going to be covering both pieces from the Libertarian Institute. We've got who's funding the attacks on Thomas Massie and what networks are backing them. This is something you wrote back in August, and the deep state targets Thomas Massie. This is back in December. Like I said, these are both on the Libertarian Institute, but for those who want to keep track of your work, one good place to see where they're all at, since you publish to a number of different spots, is oppo-research.com. But with that, Matt, it's a pleasure to have you back with us. Looking forward to talking Massie. It's been a lot of crazy stuff gone on. It's been, I don't know, probably the wildest race of this level that I've ever seen. So what are your thoughts before we get into it? Obviously, he didn't win it. So, I mean, we're covering this on Wednesday, so after the fact. But either way, regardless, win or lose, this was a crazy, interesting race with probably definitely has lots of import for the way things are going to go going forward, likely. So what are your thoughts, Matt?
Well, it's great to be here. I missed it last week. I didn't have anything new, and I missed being on here. It's great to see you. Thank you as always. And I'm really glad to talk about this because it's the kind of thing, you really have the urge to talk about after it happens. Because for those of us who, you, me, a lot of people we know and admire who believe in, a republic, not an empire, who don't believe in funding Israel, and funding Israel at all, but also with no strings attached, this was a sort of seismic event. And for me, it professionally was a seismic event because the first piece I wrote about Tom Massie was in August of last year. And that was about 6 months into me writing for the Libertarian Institute. I'd started in February. And I'd started writing for the Libertarian Institute because almost immediately after he came into office, Trump started doing things that I didn't think he should be doing. He was listening clearly. Even before the inauguration, it was clear he was listening to, Zionists, imperial operators, people involved in Ukraine, people involved in Gaza. And then immediately when he got into office, 14 days in, 15 days, he announced the Raise and Rebuild Gaza plan and shocked everybody who thought, well, America first is supposed to be, we're not getting ourselves involved, abroad. And this was, the prelude, as we now know, to, Iran, Venezuela, Iran again, all of these commercial deals abroad, these things with the United Arab Emirates, this new approach to China that took a lot of us who had supported him as an anti-war deep state candidate, as I did, by surprise. And the first 6 months of 2025 of Trump's presidency, I was writing for the Libertarian Institute. I found them because I've been writing for more, I guess, traditionally conservative outlets. And I thought, well, the conservative outlets I'm with are not going to like what I'm starting to say. And I was just absolutely blessed to get Hunter Durensis and Scott Horton at the Libertarian Institute. But the first 6 months of 2025 writing for them, I was tracing these new connections of what Trump was doing and what the Zionists were doing, but it was a developing situation. I mean, we weren't in Iran yet until the bombing didn't start until June, that first run of bombings. ICE and Stephen Miller getting really out of control didn't happen until the fall. And so I felt that I was sort of watching this situation. Well, will the interventionists win? Well, in the administration. Well, will the non-interventionists win? Will it be Tulsi Gabbard and J.D. Vance, or will it be Marco Rubio and Stephen Miller? And will it be the people against militarization or for them? And you may have seen this coming. I mean, I'd be interested to ask you because you were pretty prophetic about J.D. Vance. I was just sort of watching things as they unfolded. And in August or in July, when I found out that Trump was not only targeting Massie, but the three major Zionist billionaires, Paul Singer, Miriam Adelson, and John Paulson, were single-handedly floating this entire pack against Massie. I mean, this is a congressman this is not, a national security advisor. This is not an appointee that Jewish Zionist groups have traditionally lobbied against when they don't, Chaz Freeman, another guy whose name in Obama's administration, another guy I can't remember who's supposed to be Tulsi Gabbard's deputy. The Jewish lobby lobbies against that, the Zionist lobby. And I don't support it, obviously, but that doesn't surprise me. The fact that three of the wealthiest people in the United States with longstanding ties to Israel are mobilizing against a representative in Kentucky's 4th district who, his only crime was not opposing Israel. I mean, if you listen to Ilhan Omar, she obviously doesn't like Israel, and for good reason, if you know what they in the United Emirates are doing in Somalia. But Massie's not talking about that. He's not making a geopolitical point. He never has. He's saying, I'm against intervention. I'm against funding foreign wars. I'm against funding foreign countries. I mean, this was right in the tradition of Ron Paul. So for them to start pouring, and not only that, he's a representative. He doesn't represent the nation. He's not a think tank in Washington. These people are pouring massive amounts of money into this district in rural, exurban, suburban Kentucky against a guy who's lived there his whole life simply because he doesn't say he doesn't think Israel should exist. He says, and I think he has every right to say that. But all he says is, I don't think we should be funding them. And it's part of a broader constellation of principles. And so the notion that these powerful people, all based in New York and, Las Vegas and Miami, are going after this guy struck me as astonishingly brazen. And I wrote the first piece about it for the Libertarian Institute, talking about Singer, Paulson, and Adelson. We're all connected to networks I had run in think tanks like the Manhattan Institute that I knew about and knew people who worked for in New York. So it was a kind of close subject for me. I thought I understood it, and in many ways that piece started me off with what I'm still doing, which is writing in a much more direct way about Israel's interference, because it's gotten so blatant. And of course, it's gotten more blatant since, with Venezuela, with Iran, with the Isaac Accords, with the silencing of speech, which was already happening, but has been taken to a new level. So to me, August, when they poured this money in, was a real turning point for me. And then, of course, I wrote another piece in December, more specifically about Ed Galrein, who in October, so between August and December, Trump selected Galrein to run. And Galrein was a he's a fifth generation Kentucky farmer, but he's not a farmer. He worked on his family farm, and then, which is a kind of staple in that region of Kentucky, and then served in, special forces for 20, 30 years. And then came back, did a bunch of odd jobs, lost a state Senate race, doesn't have a lot of connection. I mean, he's lived in the district, but, Massie has really done a lot in his district. Mother Jones, which is a left-wing publication, ran this great piece about Massie and the way he's seated different sheriffs and encouraged people with libertarian bents to get into politics. He has really good local connections. And so between August, when I wrote this first piece, when news broke about these Israeli Zionist billionaires, these Jewish Zionist billionaires funding it, and then December, when I wrote the second piece about Galrein, who'd been selected, and then now, when Massie lost, I mean, in many ways, not only did this sort of push me to do more about Israel, but it also, to me, the outcome here is seismic in two ways. And then I'll let you talk. This is a long run-in, but it's a long story. The first way is Massie tried to run the kind of campaign that everybody says people should run. Long-standing ties to his district. He started out as, a local representative. Then he went to Congress. He has good relationships with sheriffs. He knows all of it, or many of his constituents. He's lived there most of his life. I mean, he visits everywhere. And yet, he lost, and he lost by a good margin. He lost by about 10%. And I think, this is just my sense, I don't know the man, but I think they were expecting this. That's what I've gleaned from what I've seen on Twitter and just sort of hearing from people. And I think they were expecting this because the amount of negative ads. And the reason the negative ads worked in part is because Massie's district is changing. Whatever highway I read about this, again, y'all should look at the Mother Jones piece, which they like Massie because he's against Trump in some ways. So it's left wing, but it's a complimentary piece. And it talks in a lot of ways about Massie's district, which is, it's rural, but it's also increasingly exurban and suburban, tied to Cincinnati and Louisville. There are major highways that run through there. So it's connecting Ohio to the south. Huge numbers of goods are trafficked. There's a lot of new industries. And so there's a whole new spate of new suburban arrivals, it sounds like. And these are people who don't have connections to their district, but they watch a lot of television. So if you run negative ads, the television is going to have a difference. And this has been the case since the 1950s. There's a wonderful book. It's fiction, but it's based on fact, called The Last Hurrah. It's about the decline of city parties among the old Democratic Party, like the Irish and the Italians, when suburbs started springing up near Boston and New York, and suddenly candidates didn't have to know their constituents. They could run these negative ads, and people without a lot of interest would just go vote one way or the other. And so 80 years later, we're seeing that still very, very much alive. And we're seeing, and there has not been, I haven't read a detailed, I'm not an expert at this anyway, but I haven't read a detailed turnout, a breakdown of who voted for what. But I think it's pretty well known that Massie's main support base is with a big part of his support base is with young people. People who maybe distrust the suburbs, who distrust government mortgages, who, like Massie, like to live a little more off the grid. Who don't believe in the American way of join a corporation, live in the suburbs, serve in the military. The people who put Galrein over the edge, I think, were older people who grew up in the 1950s and 1960s, people who want to see that America still here, people who don't want to listen to somebody who criticizes the way we've always done things. And these are the people, these old people, who still have a stranglehold on the GOP. And look, it's not all of those. I mean, I don't talk about personal stuff much, but my parents were born in the late 1940s. Their view does not match at all, and they're conservative. Their view does not match at all the Gowrine voter, right? So I don't want to act like it's everybody, but the majority do fall into that category, you know? And so I think the combination of the delocalization of politics, where they can just run these negative ads that a lot of, you know, campaign people in New York and DC, like Chris LaCivita, who was Trump's manager, campaign manager, co-manager, who ran this thing against Massie, they can just run ugly ads. They don't have to care about the difference. These Jewish Zionist billionaires can pour in this ad. They don't have to care. The combination of that and the fact that a lot of the voters were people who came up in that America, the suburban America, want it to last, trust what they see on the TV. You know, I think that basically was what doomed Massie. And the bigger story to me, and this is the last thing I'll say, is that by interfering so overtly in an unprecedented way, not simply because of the unprecedented funds spent, but because they're interfering in something far away from Jewish interests. I mean, Kentucky does not have a big population of Jews, right? Like, this isn't the White House, right? This isn't something where Kentucky has real influence over whether Israel's funded. It's one congressman. By doing this, I think these Jewish Zionist billionaires have done something not smart, because I think for a rising younger cohort, including me, this is just proof of how much Israel is involved and how unseemly they're involved in our politics. To me, the single best comment so far about the election actually came in the New Yorker, which is a Jewish Zionist publication owned by Jewish Zionists, longtime editor, Jewish Zionists. And the article, very interestingly, focused very little on Massie. It focused on the Jewish component of this. And it said, whether he wins or loses, the voices that back him are not going away, and we're going to have to deal with it. And I thought it was very interesting that in essentially the enemy camp, the Jewish Zionist camp, they see the consequence of this as waking people up. I mean, they wouldn't describe it this way. They would describe it, and sort of did in the article, as a resurgence of anti-Semitism. It's not anti-Semitism. It's a foreign nation in the name of Judaism interfering in our elections. So I think Massie lost because of hangovers from an older style of doing politics in America. And I think his loss has woken people up in a way that points to a newer style of politics, you know, which is much more skeptical of all of the things he's skeptical of.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, and I think that really does kind of shine a light on what you could say is like the 12th hour, like, salacious story that dropped for Tom Massie and some of the other tricks they were pulling. Many people may be aware that, you know, within the past, you know, like week or so, less than that even, I forget the name of the chick, some lady came out, I wouldn't even say necessarily accusing him of impropriety. I guess it depends on how you define impropriety. It was just accusing him of having an adult relationship, and then it becomes, I mean, there were some, I didn't actually watch the expose, it seems stupid, but I saw bits here and there, and the accusations I'm even seeing are just that, like, I don't know, he's some sort of man with a sexual appetite. I mean, I don't know. Yes, he is a man, and I mean, I guess that does open an interesting discussion on the ethics of how long one must wait to engage in such activities after one's wife dies, but that's like I don't know, I've already talked about this on my show. I mean, there's an argument to be made that many people, that may be how they deal with grief. I mean, in the same way that somebody may turn to drinking, somebody may turn to drugs, someone may turn to loose women. Like, it's not that crazy. This is how, you know, human beings have operated for quite a long time. And, you know, he lost his wife of decades. I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy that maybe he would find himself lonely at night and trying to find a way to cope with the pain. So I don't think it's that crazy, but it's like there wasn't even really anything in there except for saying He's, I don't know, it's improper, which, considering the people lobbying these accusations, is insanely rich, considering the side of the aisle that comes from is the Epstein class. I mean, hell, even if you just want to take the face value story that's, given out there of, his opposition, like, say, particularly Trump, hell, I mean, he is, like, basically, it's basically accepted knowledge that he slept with a porn star while his wife was pregnant, or either a young kid, I forget how old it was, but either way, like, not really a paragon of virtue, yet he's the first one to slam people like Joe Kent and Thomas Massie for, somehow, being improper in how they navigate those waters, which far be it for Trump to say. So the hypocrisy is crazy, but then, with that, I think a lot of people, and this is an old way of doing politics. As I said there, people see the storm of like, oh my God, this salacious, so they just kind of fill in the blanks and think there's something bad in there. And then, hell, they went even so far as there were like AI ads that were being put out there that were making it look like Massie was taking, I believe it was Bobert, maybe, or maybe it was MTG.
No, he was in a throuple with AOC and Ilhan Omar, which is
Ilhan Omar. Okay.
Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. I thought it was AOC and either MTG or Bobert, but okay, I guess it was AOC and Ilhan Omar. But either way, him bringing, and if you're just some boomer, you're stuck in this old political mindset, you haven't adapted to the current paradigm. You're not looking at these things critically minded of like, I might be getting lied to with AI or all sorts of other, or just getting lied to. If you're looking at that uncritically, these sorts of old political tricks will work. So, but it is pretty interesting that you kind of frame that in a way of, there will be likely backlash that comes from this. So, and they've kind of blown much of their political capital here and literal capital here. So, yes, they got rid of Massie. I'm more of an agorist guy when it comes to politics too, so like I also think there might even be a positive way of spinning this with somebody like a Massie coming out. I think this allows people to no longer view the federal government as some sort of vector through which they can change things, and so they start looking to more localized apparatuses, whether that be themselves individually, their states, their localities, whatever, and this allows them to buttress themselves more so against the Fed. It sucks that we have to lose somebody like a Massie to do that, but, and it may look in a certain way to some people that go, oh my God, this bill's passed, that bill's passed. It's like the seen and the unseen. You can always see what bill gets passed, what doesn't, but what the thing that's harder to quantify or to really put a finger on is the power of the government, which is granted to it in some abstract sense by the people through their enthusiastic compliance, their taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And if you somehow pick away at that, you have an unenthusiastic populace. To some degree, you are degrading the power of the state. So it may be less quantifiable, so it may make us feel better if we have a whole bunch of Massies, Rand Pauls, Ron Pauls in there. But it's, I don't know, in a certain realistic way, I think, well, it may not give us the warm and fuzzies. I actually think in some abstract sense it may actually pick away at the power of the empire. But either way, I know. What are is there anything there to spark something? I just thought it was interesting. You framed it in a way as like, as this is them playing old tricks. Because it very much is. That's a good way to characterize all this. This is leaning on all of the old tricks, up to including the whole Ed Galrein spook. I'm just a good old boy. Meanwhile, it looks like he's some sort of old money, spooked out type of character. So, but yeah, these are using up their using up the capital of these tricks.
Yeah, I think that was fascinating, actually. Everything you said, the abstract and the concrete. And if you don't care, I think I'm going to start with the concrete. And then I should have taken notes because there were like 3, but you kept saying new things. I kept thinking more. The first thing is, I think what the long-term problem, and I'm, we're all in our bubble, and my bubble is, conservatives who think like I do on Twitter. That's one of my bubbles, So I could be overstating, but I see so many people who are infuriated. But it's not just there. It's also, I can read a New York Times article and have a 3-time Trump voter they interview. So many people are disappointed by Trump and infuriated with what he's doing and disaffected. And then to see, and a lot of people see Massie as sort of their, after Marjorie Taylor Greene left, he's their point of light. And for Israel to get this aggressively involved I don't think people are going to forget it. I know writing that piece changed me. And I think there are a lot of other, and I have, having known Zionists, at least in an earlier stage of my life, there was at least some small way in which I could have been like, well, maybe they're doing this, but maybe they'll pull back. What will their strategy be? A lot of people seeing this are basically going to think what in the end is the truth, which are, who are these carpetbagger pricks doing this? I mean, in Massie, his first line at his concession speech was, I tried to get through to Ed Galrein, but it took a while because he has a Tel Aviv number. I mean, he's not making any bones, Massie isn't, about what caused this. And I think people are going to remember, particularly because he released the Epstein files. He got him released. He's such a strong, he has become one of the key representatives of another way to go in the Republican Party other than where Trump has gone in the last year and a half. So I don't think people are going to forget it. The other thing is, I don't think you can overstate the similarities in the kind of boomer politics that went on in this race. I was reading the New York Times and I saw this extraordinary line about Ed Galrein when they described him in the race. And let me see if I can find it. Despite being little known, even in his own district, Mr. Galrein ran the understated, risk-averse campaign of a frontrunner. Few of his events were well attended. Fewer still were open to the media. He was largely content to emphasize his agrarian upbringing, his combat experience, and most of all, his fidelity to Mr. Trump. He didn't debate Tom Massie. Last night, he gave a victory speech that was 5 minutes long and then immediately left. And his rally was not well attended by a lot of boomers, judging based on the interviews I saw. When I read this stuff, I thought of other reports that I've read about like the campaigns waged in the 1980s and the 1990s by Democrats like Michael Dukakis and Bill Clinton, or H.W. Bush, where they shut down Jesse Jackson or Ross Perot or any of the other populist candidates. And they basically stage managed everything. People didn't come to their rallies. A few spectators were let in. It was mostly for the media. And to me, what's interesting is Zionists seem to think that this will work. And maybe this success will convince them that it has. But this is the kind of politics. Andrew Cuomo tried to run this campaign in New York. This was exactly Cuomo's campaign. And of course, he came up. He was Secretary of HUD in Clinton's White House. So he came up on this style of campaigning. Andrew Cuomo tried to run this against Zohran Mamdani. It didn't work. The electorate was younger in New York. I think in many ways that if Jewish Zionists think that this is going to work again a lot, that may be good news for us because these are old strategies. And, if you look online, among younger people. Ben Shapiro, there have now been 2 articles, one in the Washington Post, one in New York Magazine in the last 2 weeks, about how Ben Shapiro is losing viewership massively. And Ben Shapiro says, the lack of self-awareness is astonishing. If I stand for Israel and against conspiracy theorists and that loses me people, I'm fine with that. Well, yes, okay, great. Most people don't want what he's selling anymore. They want what Candace Owens or Steve Bannon to some extent or Tucker Carlson is selling. And what Carlson says very clearly is these culture war issues, I care about it. They have, party unity. All of those things matter to me. But what matters more is that the ceiling or the ground is falling out beneath millennials and Generation Zers. And they don't have money. And we're sending all our money overseas and we're bailing out banks, and we're letting all these foreign lobbies and domestic lobbies affect our government in DC outside of the will of the people. And that's what's relevant to people. That's why Zohran Mamdani won his election. I looked at that fairly closely, wrote about it a lot. So I think all of the signs are that this is a Pyrrhic victory for Zionists, and they just gave themselves away and offended a lot more people by acting like the epitome of carpetbaggers. those are the two concrete points, Oh, the third one I wanted to say, Massie wasn't, that I know of, accused of impropriety. He was accused of dating a woman long distance after the death of his wife, getting a job for that woman at the congressional office of a fellow Republican named Victoria Sparks. And when that woman quit, citing what she said were abusive working conditions, and Sparks says was she couldn't do her job, Massie said, don't go public with this, just take a small settlement. And she did. And even that is disputed. Sparks said it didn't happen that way. So I'd encourage people to look this up. But I mean, the level of impropriety here is absolutely nothing, even if it did happen that way. Finally, on an abstract level, what you say from I think a more anarchist perspective, what it actually got me thinking of, and I've been thinking of it today, is the thinker you introduced me to a couple episodes ago, Le Boetie, the 16th century French thinker. I had never heard of him. I looked him up after we talked. It was absolutely fascinating because I have my master's in political thought and intellectual history, and my specialty is a lot of the ideas in Europe that led to the Declaration of Independence. They're known as little r Republican political theory. So not like the party, but Republican political theory, as opposed to liberal political theory. And Le Boetie, it turns out, he's much lesser known, and he's often not considered as a part of that tradition. In fact, he's not considered part of that tradition. But a couple scholars have recently, in the last 5 years, began making the case that some of his ideas in France are more similar, and he's considered a minor figure. I mean, he only did, this one book, but these ideas are considered very similar to some of the ideas in England during the 1640 revolution against the king that found their way to America. And the big difference between England and France, and between Le Boetie and these English revolutionary philosophers, was that they did have to resort to a civil war to get rid of the king, but Parliament was always their base. The English Civil War of 1640 that led to Charles I's death was a conflict. It started out as a conflict over taxation between Parliament and the king, just like our revolution started out as a conflict between our colonial legislatures and the king. Parliament was a workable mechanism, just like our legislatures were workable mechanisms. You could elect somebody and he'd do what you wanted him to do. In France, the Estates General, which was the Parliament of France, was completely disempowered. The king would only call it when he wanted to. They were spending more and more money. Things were getting worse and worse. And people were getting more and more discontented, and there was no way to really represent yourself. I mean, there was no political mechanisms. People were being shut out of political mechanisms. And so Le Boetie's whole thought, I read a couple pieces about him after we talked. His whole thought was, what do you do in a situation where you're shut out of national power? What's the solution? Well, he didn't really come up with one. And in the 1780s, we saw the solution, which is the streets of Paris erupted. They took over Versailles, and there was so that very much could happen here. I mean, we're seeing now acts of violence by well-educated young men who don't think that there's any other alternative. These are smart people. They write manifestos. I mean, it's not an effective way to do things, but they don't think there's another option. So when you bring this up, what do? Do we go local? Do we go to the States? I mean, I actually think about this a lot now, the last month. I don't know. I really don't. I think the fact that Massie has lost and Marjorie Taylor Greene is out, I'm interested to see what they'll do. Maybe they have some ideas. I mean, you can try to make change at the state level. There are problems there. I mean, for example, the United Arab Emirates is now heavily invested in Oklahoma via a steel making plant that it's set up. I mean, so all of these foreign entities, Israel is pushing all of these things in Florida. I mean, all of these foreign entities are pushing states too. And I mean, it's not enough to just say tend your garden. I mean, because eventually all of our liberties are going to be taken away if we don't fight back. But I think there's a significant, I mean, and look, like Hezbollah and Hamas, they are militant groups precisely because if you believe in their read and the Muslim Arab read of events, which I do, and I've studied it, they're militant groups precisely because the state cannot defend them and will not defend them. That's why they exist. Well, we're not at that point. I mean, we still have local law enforcement. We're not allowed to form militias. The problem is local law enforcement is often funded these days by DC. I mean, we still have legislatures, but the legislatures are often funded by Zionists in Israel. I mean, Marco Rubio's whole career in Florida was because of Israeli donors, because of rich Cuban donors. I mean, so this is a really difficult situation, and I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, I can think of options, none that I can articulate very well right now, but I think we're in a really difficult situation because all of these old people and these Zionists are trying to lock us out of the political process and think that they can just drive us to the margins. Well, one of the things that's happening in response is random violence. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that going to go up? Is there going to be another way for young people to express themselves? I mean, Zohran Mamdani in New York, and there's a socialist mayor in Seattle, and I'm not a socialist, though I like some people on the left. But, I mean, that's one model. But so far, I mean, often people on the left, I actually just finished a piece about this. A lot of that, I mean, even Mamdani, a lot of his critics on the left says he's betraying the working class already when he's in office and is getting in the pocket of big developers and globalists. The right, people like Tucker Carlson and Green and Massie are much more clear about what's going on and much more committed to fighting the deep state. The problem is we have absolutely no political power. And, I don't know. I just know that's the situation. I don't know what to do. So, as you can tell, you really struck a chord because when a guy like Massie gets pushed out, I mean, the Jewish Zionists intend to send us a message. It's hopeless. Go back to your farms, go back to your lives, don't interfere. We can't do that, but what are we going to do?
Yeah, I've been, this kind of brings something that I've been kind of kicking around in my head a little bit. Not necessarily entirely organic, but nothing really is. But I guess as I was reading your piece, and I think I read Ken Klippenstein's as well, so maybe it was a little bit inspired from him too. But I was looking into Ed Galerin's background. Something came to mind, kind of looking into his background. It, in some sense, reminded me of the robber barons of old. Now I know he's not literally like a robber baron in that old sort of early 1900s sense that the lefty anarchists would kind of see as their enemies. The big C capitalists, in the truest sense of the word. But I do think there's something to that. The idea that this guy, and Ed Galerin, this SEAL Team 6 guy, it's a little bit dubious what he actually even did when he was in, because you can technically be there and have less of a hardcore type of role. I was reading a little bit into that. But anyways, that aside, he seems to come from generational wealth. He's some sort of mega farmer of some sort. So he's not really, it does feel like we're getting this like time as a flat circle thing. We're seeing, seeing the same reoccurrence. We're getting these same feelings as the resurgence of the robber barons with the coming of AI, the coming of the tech billionaires, or the not even the coming, they are here, but the tech billionaires and the further moving from of the classes, hollowing out of the middle class. And we just, as you mentioned, it's like the violence. So we're seeing a reoccurrence of that as well. And, in the same exact way, onesie, twosies, kind of isolated young men, particularly typically, a little bit more of the intelligent sort, maybe a little bit more ideologically motivated. So we're kind of seeing a reoccurrence of this. We're getting the robber barons of old, and we're getting these false bastions of like masculinity that are being shown to us as, hey, this is a path. Meanwhile, they're coming from generational wealth, and they're selling you the Zog slop. So, I mean, I do think there's something there. I know I'm just throwing a lot at the wall, basically, but I don't know. There's something. Obviously, if anything, I'm more or less just more vividly describing the situation. I'm not really giving a fix here, particularly, but there's, I think, something to that. That it seems to be, there's a turning occurring, and this is the way things are moving. So, I don't know, maybe there's something to look into history for some sort of fix there. I mean, I'm going to keep with mine. I don't know. That's something that's been kicking around in my head. And with all these different pieces moving around, it feels very much like a repeat of our past.
I think, so two things. First of all, I think you're dead on the mark with Galrein. Galrein went to a couple of the colleges for like not the Navy college, but a couple of the military colleges. And then he served, and then he came back. He retired 10 years ago. And he set himself up as a consultant for two different consultancies, one of which he sort of worked for. It was a centralized agency, and one of them was his own agency. And it's in this piece, and I looked him up on LinkedIn when I wrote this piece. And he's very much talking in terms of management techniques. This is the kind of language that you can recognize. Work with high power executives to set analytics, goals, and, blah, blah, blah. You can, if you go on his LinkedIn, if it's still up, or you can see the quotes in the article that I wrote. It was very recognizable to me because it's not very different than the kids I knew who, went to an elite college and then worked at Bain or McKinsey or any of the other consultancies, that sprung up since the 80s to, cut for efficiency at, manufacturers and corporations and, come in and lay people off in the name of data analytics and profits for shareholders. And Galrein is very much speaking that big business conglomerate language. The difference between Bain and McKinsey and Paul Singer and Miriam Adelson. I mean, Singer is a hedge fund guy. Miriam Adelson's husband was a casino magnate. John Paulson made his bank. He's known to be, I think, somewhat incompetent, but he really made a good bet in 2008 that the market would tank. And he took all these positions that made him into a multi-billionaire. Unlike the robber barons, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, et cetera, these were truly self-made men who worked really hard and then essentially in many cases lucked into federal contracts for railroads or steel or whatever because the country needed it as the federal government was driving westward expansion after the Civil War, which was the first time that capital and the government, capital and the military intertwined. I mean, Madison, Jefferson, and Jackson had taken care to keep them separate, but Lincoln, Grant, etc., they were fine if the two of them combined for the purposes of westward expansion. Eventually, those bad guys, the robber barons, became monopolists and, they got a lot of power and donated to philanthropies. But, in 1880, 1890, 1900, even up till 1939, states were doing most of the work of government. What we've seen now, what's so different, is the national government and associated corporations and academics. I mean, we didn't have the military-industrial complex in 1890. You could start a labor union or a business association, and they did, and push back against this kind of stuff. And we're seeing some of this again. There's a big rise in labor unions in liberal cities. Private sector labor unions. But I don't, so much more has become centralized. And unlike the robber barons, almost all of the people who are important today didn't do it on their own. They came from the upper middle class and went to an Ivy League school, set up by the robber barons with their money. I mean, seriously, University of Chicago was a Rockefeller creation, quite literally. So yeah, I think there are real similarities in the inequality and the monopolies. And I think there are similar responses. It's just, I think it's harder to, DC is captured. So, in 1880, you could still elect your sheriff and he belonged to you, not to DC. I'm not sure that's the case anymore. I don't know. I'm not trying to sound pessimistic here. I'm not, and I think that as our generation gets more vocal and the older one dies out, we're going to get a very different kind of congressman, for example, or even local state legislature. And, you know, I mean, Michael Rechtenwald at AZAPAC, which is the first anti-Zionist PAC, you know, he's supporting 12 or 14 candidates, you know, who are running on an anti-Zionist line. So, I mean, I think we're going to see more of this. My question is it going to get bad so fast that the situation outstrips the politics? I mean, because again, the only side that's really doing anything successfully right now are the Democratic Socialists. I mean, they're successful right now. We'll see what happens in the next 2 years, but they're successful. But a lot of them are successful because they're in cities and sort of tied to some of the networks, even though they're against the networks. It's a weird situation. So my question is, can we fix this politically? Or does this thing really run off the rails where people feel disenfranchised and there's just random violence or militias or, you know, and I'm sure there's another solution that I'm not thinking of and other options. I'm not trying to, I mean, believe me, I'm not trying to create a dystopian future or this stark divide. I mean, my thoughts are developing just like yours are. I don't know. That's sort of at the moment how I'm conceiving of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, that kind of brings to mind, I think, probably, the final topic or question here is, I mean, kind of generally, where do you think about where this goes? If you saw the concession speech from Massie, you already mentioned how he made the little joke that a lot of people clutch their pearls about him saying, you know, he's trying to reach Gallery and he had a hard time finding him in Tel Aviv. Obviously, just a silly joke. I didn't really think it was that big of a deal. A lot of people were like, "Oh my God." Whatever.
It was a great joke. He should have gone harder, for fuck's sake.
Exactly.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. And then, anyway, and then after that, then he kind of egged the audience on a little bit. He was asking for it, so it didn't really come off as begrudging in any way. If anything, he was essentially egging the crowd on, but he got a chant for Massie for president, Massie for president. And this kind of gets me thinking, a lot of people are wondering about the exit of MTG, and now it's kind of, you know, all the political blocks seem to be falling perfectly in place. You know, somebody like an MTG who maybe wasn't going to go as hard in the paint as somebody like a Massie also probably wasn't going to be the leading man in any sort of future political duo of sorts, that this would, I don't know, maybe save her political capital to be saved for later, keep her out of the mudslinging a little bit earlier. Likely she probably was going to end up in a similar situation like Massie anyways. You allow more focus to be on Massie, allow him to go out the hero swinging in his race, and I don't know, everything kind of forms up perfectly for a 2028 with a Massie MTG possible as a VP slot. It kind of is perfect in many ways. Now, I will say, you know, from my perspective, I mean, this reminds me a lot of the Trump situation. Also, even to get a little bit more granular into, like, say, LP drama, even like the Dave Smith stuff. I used to be a huge Dave Smith fan, and I was one of the people way back in the day before I was, like, fully, you know, hip with, like, agorism and stuff, and the idea of, like, essentially I was more amenable to things like working politically within the system. And I was one of the first early people who was calling, hey, somebody like Dave Smith should run, even kind of signaling like an LPMC, like in the early days, where like maybe there's something here. And you know, how here we are now, funny enough, I mean, there's been a lot of people giving the LP shit, the LPMC shit for the current situation, considering to some degree they chipped in the Fuhrer that got the Fuhrer, the new one, Trump, into office. So, like, to some degree, they are responsible, the LPMC, for this current situation of, funny enough, you know, with Trump coming in, making all these promises to libertarians at the convention, seemingly not following up on any of them. He said he was going to have, like, a libertarian in his cabinet. I believe that maybe you could say there was RFK if you really, really stretch the definitions of things. And then, you know, he ends up and it ends up completely backfiring for libertarians, and one of the only good libertarians in there gets ousted with somebody like a Massie. So it's kind of completely backfired. So I guess I'm just more hazarding caution. While somebody like it, I can totally understand how something like a Massie MTG presidency sounds amazing from the outside looking in. I'd almost be willing to bet damn near everything I have that we'd be looking for at a fell for it again moment, just like we did with the LPMC, just like we did with Dave Smith, just like we have with Trump. I mean, obviously these are different things, and I think these are characters who actually more so. I mean, I think Dave believed what he believed in what he was saying. So did the LPMC mostly. Trump, I don't think did. Massie does. So that would be the things, I guess, that differ there. But I think so far as the way the political machine grinds people out, I got to be real. I do not foresee that ending well for the prospects. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how it works. I'm interested to see how it works out. But I don't know. I would like to see them more as like being characters from the outside, using leveraging their clout from being previous members of the political apparatus. But I'm interested to see what you have to say. I'm just giving my 2 cents. That's where I'd hazard some caution before readily embracing this all for again. It's how many times can we fall for it? Is this kind of how I look at it? Like, oh, we're gonna make it work in this whole federal system again. We're gonna get involved. This will not backfire. I don't know. We'll see. I think one way or another, even if you get the biggest angel you can think of, I just think the political forces have a way of basically, for the most part, getting what they want in the end. So, but anyways, your thoughts, Matt, and we'll get out of here.
I think if you're, I'm now approaching this like I was in a seminar. Like I was in a seminar being talked to by somebody, like a professor. What would they say? On an analytical level, I think what you have to do if you're going to talk about exercising their influence outside of the culture, if that's the case you're going to make, sort of the more maybe anarchistic case, I think you have to be specific about how, and how that can create something where we're not tunneling into this thing where a bunch of people are talking on the outside, there's no political representation, and suddenly young militia groups start springing up on both sides to fill in the gap where politics is. I think you have to make, because I'm not averse to what you're saying, but I can't picture it. And I say that not because mine is more right. I say that because when I think about sort of a nonviolent, hopeful solution, and I really appreciate you bringing this up, because we've been talking sort of along the lines of going back to the States, doing something like the 19th century on the ground. The other option, and thank you for opening this up with this third party to that or to a more anarchistic thing, is some sort of third party run that actively uses, and we've never had one of these before. The only time I've heard it mentioned is Scott McConnell in the American Conservative, and it's a piece that's worth looking up. He's too complimentary of a Zionist or two, so I don't love the piece. But besides that, it's a really good piece. He's anti-war. He says Trump fucked us. He's a Pat Buchanan guy. He says, what do we do? He says maybe aspects of the libertarians and the anti-war conservatives need to ally with anti-war left and create some sort of third force for 2028. And I think I wrote about this in the piece I cited him in the piece I wrote, the second piece I wrote on Hindutvas that we talked about. I think if you're going to do that, you have to have an anti-war message. I think you have to take Ron Paul's line, which is prophetic. Right now, it's warfare state and welfare state. And we want to eventually, we don't like the welfare state, but we know people need to get by because things are so bad. We are going to go gangbusters for the warfare state. The military bases, the corporations, the people who run it, those supremacist groups. I think you have to have a party that withholds support from either side unless that side publicly pledges to do certain things and make this a very public thing. And the reason I think that Massie and MTG would be different is that if you look at Trump's background, and I've written about this, the guy's a Jewish Zionist. He is. We were all fooled. I was fooled more than anybody. I shouldn't have fucking been, because I knew people who knew him in New York in the 1980s, but I was. The guy's a Jewish Zionist. He came up. these were the people that Trump, as an outer borough guy, looked up to in New York in the 80s. They were the rising power. He wanted to be like them. The Apprentice was set up by Jeff Zucker, a Jewish Zionist. He was the promoter. Vanity Fair gave Trump the Art of the Deal spread that helped make him more famous. Vanity Fair is owned by the Newhouse family, who also own the New Yorker. They're Jewish Zionists. Roy Cohn was his fixer. Roy Cohen's a connected Jewish Zionist. I mean, all of the powers that be in New York in the 80s that were revving up the stock market, they were Jewish Zionists. Trump acts like them. He's a media savvy deal maker, quote unquote, and he's skeezy as hell. Dave Smith is a different kettle of fish, and people I respect him. And so I want to be very limited in what I say, not because I'm holding anything back particularly, just because I want to, he has certainly played a role in normalizing criticism of Israel, in part because he's Jewish. My experience with anti-Zionist Jews is that they find it, I'm thinking about how to phrase this, not what I think. I think it's very difficult to be an anti-Zionist Jew and have any connection with your community and truly go against Zionism. And so I think there's a reason that Dave Smith may have proved a disappointment to some. And I think, and I knew some of these people, I think on some level it's a very human reason. Anything you say in public, your Bubba, your grandmother is going to look at you when you come for dinner. I mean, I'm not attacking these people, but I don't think, and Israel is at the heart of the military corporate complex. I don't think they're necessarily appropriate for all sorts of human understandable reasons. I don't think they're necessarily appropriate leaders of an anti-war, anti-empire movement that Israel is the most visible, because it's at the center of our corporate complex, target of. Whereas Massie and Green, Massie's lived in his district his whole life, except for MIT and a couple years after that. Green is from Georgia. These people are not in any way, they don't have ties for the most part to those systems that can guilt you in the case of some Jewish anti-Zionists, or corrupt you in the case of Trump. They can go for this thing, and I don't know how it would work. National politics is very evil, and you can try to make a party promise something and then the party doesn't deliver. But you can also get a national platform by doing that. If you try to hold one of the parties hostage, or both of them, you get a national platform. Nobody's forgotten Ralph Nader in 2000, and he ran on fucking consumer protections. Anti-Israel, anti-war, anti-military corporate is a much more sexy role thing. And so I think that if Massie or Green were to do this, or both, I'd be willing to risk being disappointed and sign up to help,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we'll have to agree to disagree there, and I'm looking forward to more discussions on the matter. And who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. But it's one of those things that, hey, at the end of the day, either way, it seems like the arrow is getting closer to the target. If it's if this is a Felford again, every single time, it is like a Felford again that's getting closer to the bullseye at the very least, it seems like. So maybe there's a positive to be had there. But with that, let's go get out of here. We'll be back here in about another week. You have a bunch of other pieces, I think, going to be cranking out here soon, so I'm sure we'll be covering that. Here's your Twitter, at oppo_research, your website, oppo research, oppo-research.com. Is there anything else you want to pass on to my audience? Any other plugs I missed, et cetera, et cetera?
Thanks for letting me get this off my chest. I'm serious. This was a tough one yesterday.
Yeah, a lot going on. I was looking forward to talking to you as well, and I'm glad we've done it. But I'm looking forward to a new topic next week. With that, for those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers, and Twitter as well. On Twitter, that's at Tower Gang Jose. Everywhere else, that is the No Way Jose podcast. And if you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. The lowest level is $2. That gives you access to a whole host of perks, gives you access to early episodes just like this one. I try to do about 1 to 2 of those per week. Try to keep about 3 to 4 behind the paywall at any given time. Also give you guys access to the ad-free RSS feed, to the Telegram, to the pre-show, post-show, and video calls on me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Also give a big shout out to the highest level of my Patreon. As a big thank you for their support. And my previous coach on Tower Gang, at Leonard Toad, also at Appregate Deeds, at ZOVRCK, at _ Vizil, Tim Tell, at John Klebold, big fan of the show, Tormate, at Wayne Tackles, Winter Cover Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, Jacob Wintergrad of the Biblical Anarchy Podcast, and Jacob Black, that beautiful bastard. With that, guys, we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye. Whew.